And no desire? Let you stay on.
Johannes,
No.
The emotion tore through Lynn's heart and melted her stance. He was right, and he took her in when there was nowhere to turn.
Kept you around because you worked hard and could be good at this. No wife, no sons, and being alone was work. You've been faithful.
I'm sorry.
Johannes looked her in the eyes as he stopped his churning motion. No, you are. But we've got to finish this leather. Can't do this alone.
He can't, and Lynn knew it. She grabbed the 2 heavy buckets and walked toward the door. As she passed, Johannes let go of his longboard and wrapped an arm around her. Not a full hug. Johannes wasn't like that. Lynn knew she wouldn't get the lecture on loafing. She smelled sweat and the tonics of tanning permeating his apron, but it was his scent, and the first in her young life she could remember. Lynn couldn't stand the smells of the tannery, but she couldn't live without them. Lynn's arms were exhausted. Her back burned as she tried to straighten with the load filling her arms. The stack of leather armor pieces weighed more after Johannes's process. She wished Johannes would hire help or take on another apprentice. At least someone else could help move the finished products into storage. That would not happen. The last breastplate would fit on top of the pile of finished armor. Lynn didn't have time to rebuild another stack, and Johannes hated uneven piles. Heaps of different heights proved she didn't plan ahead, and he didn't want to give customers the idea he didn't do good work. She gave one last lift and reached to the top of her toes. Done for the day. Please don't fall over. Her hands scrambled to hold a stack of armor up, but the weight was too much. She scurried out from under the collapsing pile.
Lynn, armor better not be scratched. You'll be polishing it till sunrise if it is.
Let me clean it up. What a mess. Each piece of armor must weigh 20 pounds, and the entire stack was on the ground. Lynn's body registered the bruises from the crash, and her exhausted mind wanted to let go and cry. Her stomach growled. Why didn't I grab the ladder? Now she'd sit and stack the lowest level again. She steeled herself for the task and began to rebuild each pile. Lost in her thoughts, the banging on the door to the tannery startled Lynn. She panicked as she looked at the work she still had to clean up. They had 2 days to finish the current contract with the Duke. Johannes wouldn't take on more jobs until he finished this one, his biggest deal yet. Tears welled in her eyes. She couldn't work more hours than she was putting in. The voices coming from the work area were loud. Lynn wondered why they were shouting, so she slipped closer to the door and tried to make out the words. She peeked through the cracked door and saw the fires under the massive iron vats glowed a deep red, but it was enough light to make out the visitors. A pair of men faced off against Johannes in the deepening gloom of the tannery. They didn't have the fancy clothes of the Duke's men, and they didn't carry themselves like merchants. Lynn watched as Johannes crossed his arms over his chest and shook his head. The men turned and left. She wished she'd heard the conversation. 2. Making ends meet. Lynn swirled her spoon in the thin gruel in her wooden bowl. She glanced between the dishes and noticed Johannes gave her the larger share of the vegetables and an extra piece of meat. His focus was on his meager meal, and he dipped hard bread to soften the fare. He noticed her attention.
Should eat while it's hot. Never good when gruel gets cold.
Just checking to see if he gave me too much again.
Growing girl doing the heavy work. Wish there was more to put in your bowl.
We'll get the payment for the contract by the end of the week, right?
If we finish the work.
Lynn turned her head to the pantry while Johannes went back to work on his bowl. After a harsh winter, their supplies were low, and she wasn't confident they'd be eating much by the end of the week. He never charged enough for his work. The hides, the materials, the time, the crafting, and the shop were expensive for any artisan. Work for tanners and their leather goods wasn't a sure life like a blacksmith or carpenter. Johannes owned this shop, and he made enough to keep things going, but they were always on the edge of survival. What do we do after the Duke's men come and pay the rest?
Find more work.